Back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, joined by Jenny Crumpton, not Jennifer. We just got permission to call her Jenny. Ricky Younger and Lisa Janowitz.
I don't have a nickname.
When I was young, I was Ricky.
You were Ricky?
Yeah,
see,
and some of my relatives still
We
call
have to
me
call him
Ricky.
Ricky then.
Okay.
It didn't work out with Lucy, though.
Yeah,
well, there has been a lot of talk, by the way, of the 2016 presidential election. Hey, it's only 22 months away. Why not? Is it too early to be talking about this? Well, based on the election cycles, Last week, all the big names and not so big names were in Iowa for the Freedom Summit, including one Sarah Palin.
Another Latin word, status quo, and it stands for, man, the middle class, everyday Americans are really getting taken for a ride. That's status quo. And GOP leaders, by the way, the man can only ride you when your back is bent. So strengthen it. Then the man can't ride you. American won't be taken for a ride because so much is at stake. And we can't afford politicians playing games like nothing more is at stake.
Thinking maybe Sarah probably should have stayed back in Alaska that day. Rick, you agree?
You know what, Joe? About 2.5, 3 years ago, I took a vow that I would not write a word about Sarah Palin or Donald Trump, or I wouldn't talk about them because they are not serious people, they are not serious candidates, and that is all I'm saying about the two of them.
She was a vice presidential candidate at
She
one
was
point.
an idiot. I don't care what she was opposed to.
She was the darling of the Republican Party at one time.
She never could have been the darling of the Democratic Party.
I think she made a stop by Colorado on the way to Iowa because it sounded a little like a pothead. She kind of had like some slurring of
the former
speech.
Alaska governor of being high when she made that speech.
You know,
I don't know what it was.
It's just
there any
a
questions?
question.
Let me share a story about Sarah Palin. So I interviewed her last year for this network. And while we're setting up camera and everything, I said to her, so you mentioned being a hockey mom before. Who do you follow? Edmonton? Who's your professional team? I go, and she goes, I love the New Jersey Devils. Now, I'm a big Devils fan. I'm from New Jersey. She goes, oh, yeah, Scotty Gomez was the first Alaskan NHL player, and he won 2 cups, and I've followed him ever since. And I was taken in by the fact that she is magnetic. I know that doesn't make her presidential.
Okay.
I know that.
Charisma goes a long way.
So
She
there's-
finds a
right.
way to connect with people.
Right.
And I think she'd be best served as somebody who raises money for the party, right? Who speaks to the base in terms of raw meat, and maybe, is a kingmaker, whatever that
But
may
in
be.
terms of speaking, and she's Bill Clinton has charisma too, but
Right.
it doesn't always translate. So one-on-one or with certain people, but it's not
You know, I have to
translating.
Hoover vacuum cleaner salesmen also connect with people.
I have to say that when she was announced as John McCain's running mate back in, what was that, 08?
2008, yeah.
It was my first year in seminary. I remember sitting at my table, I was studying, and I was watching on TV, and I actually got really excited. I thought, okay, the Republican Party has this female they're bringing in. She seems
who
pretty
is she? Right,
smart,
right.
sharp, family-oriented, and
She was big when she first came out. She
Huge.
really
She
was.
but it's there's a problem when people are underprepared. Again, I'll give her the same defense sometimes as I just gave poor Eric at the White House.
You're comparing her to Eric Carlson, the intern that we just compared to.
But
They
that's
did
not
sound a
fair
little
to the
similar.
intern.
What is amazing
That's
that
so unfair to
7
Eric.
years ago that she came onto the national stage, she hasn't held office for 6 years, and yet we still talk about her. For whatever reason,
She's
she
still
knows
out
how to
there.
strike
We don't.
a nerve.
She's still out.
Rick doesn't.
She's
Okay.
still out there, whether it's on a network show, or she has her reality shows, or she's writing books,
And
and
the
she.
American public is more attuned to reality TV than they are
Yeah.
to politics
And I
and
think
the
those are the
reality of
clowns
what's
still out there,
happening.
too,
Well,
right?
let's get on with the reality of
he's not.
moving on
At
from
least
Sarah
Ronald
Palin.
McDonald's still out there.
And let's get to the latest Real Clear Politics polls average, and let's see who stacks up where. Can we get that on the screen, guys? There we go. Then Mitt Romney, obviously name recognition certainly leading the way here, 20.3%. Then you got let's move on. But Bush was second. Then we go down the list. Huckabee, Paul, Scott Walker, who you would probably say should be higher in that regard, and then Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Rick Perry. One name that I didn't see on there, somebody that I'm not going to say I endorse, but certainly I'm a fan of, his name is John Kasich, and he's the Ohio governor who just won re-election by 30 points. Right. He inherited an $8 billion deficit, now has them at a $1.5 billion surplus, and he's using that surplus to go towards whether it be drug addiction or mental illness. He's a different kind of candidate, yet I never see him in these polls, but I am telling you right now, I think he's going to be a major, major contender in 2016. Rick, you tight-lipped me on that one.
Vice President, maybe. Look, as you know, I know Governor Kasich a little bit. Kasich. I won't even.
Disrespect.
Not a huge fan, and I'll tell you why. Here's his problem, in my view. I ran into him over at Fox before the football season began. I asked him what he thought about the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Where he went to school.
Yes, where I went to school. And he said, they're not very good. I said, I can't believe you would say that to me.
Well, they lost
he
the
was
first
wrong.
home game to Virginia Tech, so that's what
happened. Started.
Oh, good grief. All right, well, let's.
So that was it.
We have to go to break, guys, unfortunately. Coming up next, Donald Trump had some interesting thoughts on Romney and Bush. We'll discuss them after the break. Don't go anywhere. This is the Daily Raft. And welcome back, everybody. Let's continue to look into our election 2016 crystal ball. Donald Trump, you've heard of him, recently shared some of his thoughts on Mitt Romney. Let's take a look.
Something happened to him in the last month. He had that election won. And let me tell you something. That election, sort of like a deal maker that can't close the deal. I know many of those guys. They get it up to the 1 yard line. They go, I can't close it. Or a golfer that can't sink the 3-footer to win the tournament. And there are many of them. Most people are like that. I mean, most people are like that. You can't give somebody another chance. Because actually, I think this election is tougher to win than beating a failed president. I really do. I think beating Obama would have been a much easier one than the one that's coming up, which is sad to say, but true. So you can't have Romney.
I never forgave him for destroying the United States Football League and my New Jersey Generals, but that was way, way back when in the 80s. On a side note, Jennifer, does the Donald have a point?
You know, Donald Trump's point is always Donald Trump, and that's what this is all about. I mean, this is showboating. You know, he constantly talks about putting himself in the ring.
Donald Trump.
However, I do think, look, Mitt Romney had to work so hard in 2012 to flip his image because as governor of Massachusetts, he instituted healthcare reform. He had to really work to get really uber conservative. Now we see him back out on the trail eating barbecue in Mississippi and trying to talk about the poor as if he has really cared about them for a long, long time. Maybe he has, but this constant rebranding, especially if you have to rebrand yourself to be authentic, I think there's a big problem there. So I do think that the Donald has a point.
Well, let's say we took Mitt Romney out of the sentence that you just said before, right, about eating barbecue and reinventing himself. And, obviously he's a rich guy trying to play somebody who's just an everyday person. Well, what if I put Hillary Clinton into that sentence instead? She makes $250,000 a speech. She makes a lot of money. She has an image problem in terms of being connected to Wall Street. I think if it's a Romney-Clinton kind of matchup, it's almost like a lesser of two weasels if you're looking for
the
somebody
lesser
who's
of two weasels?
Evils, weasels. Very good.
No. Like I said, I think he has a point. I think that the way he says it is completely inappropriate. He likes to talk about losers and, really beat up on people in a way that elevates himself. So, I don't really take much that he says to heart.
Interesting.
But I do think that this is going to be a very interesting election cycle for the GOP.
Which one of them don't you take to heart, Romney or Trump?
Trump.
Okay, just curious.
Yes.
Interesting.
But the GOP has a big identity crisis going on right now. We all know that. You can't hide that. So, we really have to watch how this plays out and see who becomes what character as this narrative sort of emerges.
Rick, when I see all of these candidates jumping in, we have 3 pages of graphics worth, and we didn't have Kasich on there.
Return to the clown car.
Well, clown car, you might want to label it that way, but what I see is no fear. No fear of Hillary Clinton, who's supposed to be, again, the inevitable candidate, and obviously the girl that cannot be beat. In 2008, she got her clock cleaned by a guy who was in the Senate for about 5 minutes. Right. So it looks like that she's not intimidating anybody because she's not a good candidate. She's a good idea, not a good candidate.
Talk to these people's staffs. Believe me, they're intimidated by Hillary Clinton. Anyone who
Why would they run then if they're intimidated?
Because they still want the nomination, and anything can always happen. Why do you want to run? Why does anybody want to run for president, except for Donald Trump? And as we figured out in the last segment, I would take advice from my 5-year-old granddaughter on politics before him. But of course you're going to run if you think you can get the nomination of your party.
I still think she's beatable, though.
And
but
they're
already
she's
beatable. She's not the
agree.
same Hillary as she was in the first election.
But it depends who runs against her. Whether
exactly.
She's
Exactly.
You know what I love, by the way?
You
know what I love? That in 2008, all we heard about was Grandpa John McCain, and he might drop dead on the campaign
look at
trail,
Hillary.
and she will be older when she
will
runs
be,
this time.
next to Reagan. She will be 69 years old if
But
she
she's
wins.
much more vibrant and experienced.
Not as
than
vibrant
when,
as she
you know,
was in the
69 is
first
the new
year, first
39,
election.
you know?
She
You
doesn't
should
have
know.
that
I
same
should know.
fire in her.
I'm gonna
But the
get into
GOP is already talking about Hillary Clinton. So if you're going on the trail, I don't care how much barbecue you eat. If you're
Right.
talking about
Right.
against Hillary, you're already belying the fact
Yeah,
that they're
why?
worried.
That's such a great point. If they're not afraid of Hillary, why aren't they running against anybody else? They're only running. I mean,
Because
you
who
heard-
else is going to get the nomination?
Wait, you heard. Well,
Who do you want to run against? Elizabeth Warren?
According to you, what you just said, that Hillary didn't get the nomination in 2008, and everybody assumed she would. So, using your own argument, I don't know who
No,
else.
my
can
own
get it.
argument didn't include Elizabeth Warren in 2008.
You
It's
know
a lot
what?
different than Barack Obama, who's an historic
argument in
figure, Rick.
Your argument in 2008 would not have been Barack Obama. He wasn't a historic figure until he became a historic figure. He was, as you say, a short-lived senator from.
But there was some buzz around him going into that.
Right,
There's
there
buzz
was.
around Elizabeth Warren.
No question. What if it's Bush Clinton again? That means 28 out of the last
okay with me.
36 years will have a Bush or a Clinton
So
as a
what?
vice president or a president.
I think it says a lot about reform we need to do for
Right.
elections
Why do you
and
guys
the
care
amount
about
the royal
of money
family?
that people have to
Don't
have.
you want the
to
best
run
person to be president?
Well,
I don't care what their last name is.
Well, the fact is
We
that
gotta go.
finance reform still needs to happen.
We gotta go.
don't
Coming
care
up
who they are.
next on the Daily Raft. Great discussion, guys. It's time for our political potluck party where we all pick our favorite stories of the day. This is the Daily Raft, only on Newsmax Television, live from New York.